Come to me, come to me. When you're weary, your burden's heavy. Come to me, my yoke is easy. So come to me.
Good morning. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the 14th service of Alila Ministry, where our faith is rooted in God, our divine creator. I am minister, teacher, student, and servant, Andrea Grace. Thank you for joining, because today's service will be on the delicate topic of what it is to take one's own physical life. What happens when someone commits suicide? Does the soul end up in purgatory? Does the soul burn in hell? What's the truth of it? So before we go into the topic, let's first begin with prayer. And this prayer is by Colleen Hannick. So just start to settle into the support of the chair. If you're standing, the support of the floor. Just connect with the unconditional, loving support of Mother Earth. Notice how she holds you in just the right amount, and that she's held your ancestors through all time, that she's provided everyone through time the food to eat, the water to drink, the air to breathe. And so settle into this support. Just let her take your everyday stresses, just for right now, just for this moment. Remember our hands, and let's bring our two hands to meet in front of the heart. In that prayer position, let's lift from the heart. Drop the chin, bow the head, surrendering the I know mind to the wisdom of the open heart. Take a nice healing breath here. Let us remember that we are in the holy presence of God, loving Creator. We asked for strength, and you gave us difficulties to make us strong. We asked for wisdom, and you gave us problems to solve. We asked for prosperity, and you gave us purpose and brains to use. We asked for courage, and you gave us fears to overcome. We asked for patience, and you gave us situations where we were forced to wait. We asked for love, and you gave us troubled people to help. We asked for justice, and you called us to be just and to lead with integrity. Lord, we've received nothing that we asked for or wanted, and yet we received everything that we needed. For this, we give thanks. And so next we will review the Alila Ministry mission. Our mission is to provide a safe and supportive space for individuals seeking holistic healing and spiritual guidance grounded in our faith in God. We believe that true healing comes from a connection to the divine and the recognition of the inherent divinity within each individual. We seek to honor the body, mind, and spirit connection through natural healing methods aligned with God's design for the human body. We strive to empower individuals to take an active role in their own healing process by providing guidance and support that's rooted in spiritual principles, and we aim to create an environment that fosters compassion, connection, and growth. Through our work, we hope to inspire others to deepen their faith in God and to discover the transformative power of spiritual healing. All right, so to our topic. And so I would hazard to say that you or somebody that you know has direct experience with somebody, a friend, a family member, who has taken their own physical life. And the word that we use now is the word suicide. Even in my own family lineage, my mum and I are both interested in genealogy, and so over the years we have documented our family tree. And so we know that my mother's, let's see, My mother's grandmother's dad, he killed himself after the death of his wife. He felt like he was the cause of her death. And so even though he had several children, some of whom were still small, he decided to take his own life. And so I thought I would share the article that was in the local newspaper when it happened. Reads like this. So it was published in the local paper. And Wallaroo is a country town in South Australia, where I'm from. The title is Suicide at Wallaroo. Great excitement prevailed at an early hour in Wallaroo on Saturday morning when it was reported that an old identity, the WM is William, Mr. William F. White, living on the working men's blocks, had committed suicide. About 6:30 a.m., a number of residents of the town were startled by a loud report of the discharge of a dynamite cap. However, very little noise was taken of it until about 7 o'clock, when it was reported that Mr. White had been found outside his house with the top of his head blown off. It's supposed that he put a dynamite cap in his mouth and then exploded it. Deceased had been drinking for some time, and when his wife died some time ago, it seemed to prey on his mind, and he had been heard to say that he felt he was the cause of it. He was until recently employed as a wharf laborer. And there's a moving, though candid report via the inquest into his death by his son, who is 16. So the event took place on Friday, December the 16th. So he said, I'm 16 years of age. I work for Mr. Richards, the plasterer. Identify the body now lying in the morgue as that of my father. Went to Moonta by the 1:30 p.m. train on Friday, returned at 9:30 p.m., went to Mr. Clement's, and then home. When I got home, father was not there. All the children were away. 2 were at Clement's and 2, besides myself, at Kerslakes. He lists the children. I got to Kerslakes about 10:30 or 11 p.m., went home at 6 a.m. on Saturday. Was accompanied by William Kerslake. And when I went into the house, my father was sitting on his bed. He asked where Lil and Bob were. Replied that they were up at Kerslake's. He said, why didn't they come home? Replied, I don't know. Told father I was going to take Adelaide's, my sister, box. So Adelaide is my mum's grandmother, so my great-grandmother. He made no reply. Kerslake and I took the box and went away, left father sitting on the bed. My sister, Adelaide, is 21 years old. She was going to Moonta. She had a few words with father and left about a fortnight ago. We had not gone far, about 150 yards, when we heard a shot. I said that something had happened. We went back. Saw father lying on a sofa outside the house, dead, with the top of his head blown off. Went and called my sister from Kerslake's. We had no firearms in the house, but father kept fuses, dynamite, and so on. He'd been drinking very much lately, but was sober when I saw him. The old sofa was kept outside the kitchen. It was used as a washing table. So the verdict of the inquest was that the deceased, William F. White, came to his death by an act of his own hand while in a melancholy state of mind. And so what we can detect from that story is that there was a sense of despair. And so somehow it seemed that the only choice was to end it, right? To end that melancholy, to end the pain, to end the suffering. And so that was the course of action. We also know that he wasn't quite in his right mind because he had been heavily drinking. So that's one instance where I've had direct experience with somebody who has taken their own life, even though it's deep in my family tree. But even as a teenager, the boyfriend that I had, he decided to take his own life. We weren't together at the time. He was struggling. He was very intelligent. And I think that he was just frustrated and bored by how life was. And so one day, when his family were away, he I don't know what the language is. He closed the garage door and he turned the car on and essentially asphyxiated himself. It's heartbreaking. It's sad. We, from our point of view, can't help think that these deaths were preventable. And we can cast our mind over society and ask ourselves, so why isn't it so that from an early age, through all facets of society, in the churches, in the schools, within the home, that it's not so deeply ingrained in our culture that bad things happen, unexpected, unwanted, unpleasant, stressful things happen. And yet, in the face of that, it's to be expected, by the way, it's expected. And that in the face of the unwanted, the unpleasant, the unexpected, that our job is to deepen our commitment to self-care, to nurturing the body, helping it be strong and vital, and to turn our faces to that which is good, that which is joyful. There's always something good and joyful, even in the face of the chaos, always. And we just started it with our prayer. We found it just by connecting with the unconditional love and support of Mother Earth, who's been supporting our ancestors through all time by providing generously, unconditionally, without discrimination, food for us to eat, the water for us to drink. She filters it for us, the air for us to breathe. So why isn't it that we haven't been taught these things, to have this psycho-emotional resilience, this spiritual resilience? Yeah, it's painful, right? And I can even, to be honest, think of times when I was a teenager, like around that time when Derek took his life, that, okay, maybe I should do the same thing, because we haven't been told this kind of resilience. And more for me, if I'm honest about what I was thinking at the time, for me, I was struggling with the household relationships in the family. And so it was more to do with a punishment, if I had to say, that I wanted to punish them by taking my own life so that they would feel something that I didn't think that they were feeling. Would they feel loss? Would they feel regret? Would they feel the pain that I was feeling? So to explore that even further, I can see that actually it's just the personality wanting to control something that she really can't control. And so I don't know, maybe these stories are relatable to you. Maybe you, or again, somebody that you know has had these thoughts. And so the cause for the story about my mum's great grandfather, so my great great grandfather, and with Derek, is that they were in a state of desperation. There was a feeling of despair, of hopelessness, of frustration. And I don't know truly what was going on in Derek's mind. He was very complex, very intelligent. But my takeaway of it was that he just was bored, honestly, like frustrated. And I don't know whether his motive was to punish his family, but regardless, things weren't quite right. His mind and my great great grandfather's mind was not right. He wasn't in right mind. Now, at the same time, in modern society, a phenomena is arising in the face of what the church says about suicide being a sin, but there is this rising acceptability where somebody can choose to end their life through medical means. The system is of an assisted suicide. And I know somebody who also went that route where he was diagnosed with a terminal disease. And so he opted to end his life before the disease rendered him completely not himself. And so in Canada, I think a law has been passed to make it legal to end your own life voluntarily. So it's interesting because, again, what's the truth of it? No matter what the cause, if you end your own life before God's timing, does the soul end up in purgatory? Does the soul burn in hell? What's the effect of that, right? What's the next step in that soul's journey, in that soul's path? If we look historically at the tendency to end our lives, we find that life in primitive culture wasn't as valued as it is now, that the culture back then was very much an eye for an eye, a life for a life. And so there was this interesting belief at the time that, and maybe there's still residue of it now, but there's a belief that if somebody had experienced a wrongdoing and proper justice wasn't served, so at the time it was believed that the spirits and the ancestors, through the shaman, through the medicine man, would meter out the justice. But if justice wasn't properly served, then the victim of the crime might threaten to kill themselves so that their ghost can then be the one that hands out that justice, that haunts them and makes sure that they get what they deserve. So, and then also in history as well, it was common that a husband and wife, if the husband died before the wife, then she would kill herself over the husband's grave to make sure that they were together in the afterlife. So what I'm just exploring now is suicide through an historical lens where we haven't met sin yet. It's just simply what's the motive for ending the human life at that time, right? Now, more recently, when I was back in Australia, Mum and I were watching a couple of Australian television shows, and the first show, it's called Secret City, and the very first scene was a young woman. She was an Australian woman, a student who was in Beijing on a scholarship or something like that, I forget. And the opening scene is that she sets herself on fire in Beijing, crying out, "Free Tibet." So that's another form, right? We can use so that's a form of martyrdom, right? We can find that it's connected to advocacy. So in my video about the martyr is connected to advocacy, it's connected to service. But in this case, the body is being sacrificed to make a statement, right? And then in the other show, which is called Total Control, a character in the show also set himself on fire when the bank took his property. And so that was a way of making a statement to the banks, right? There's a sacrifice there. And so we wouldn't say that in those instances, they're in a melancholy state of mind. We wouldn't necessarily say that they're depressed. We would say that they're making a statement, a very strong statement by sacrificing their own physical life for the cause, for people to start to pay attention, right? And we know that Mahatma Gandhi, he would go on a hunger strike, and we know that some people have died by starving themselves as a form of protest, right? So it's interesting. It's like the body is being used as collateral. So even if I compare my thoughts as a teenager, contemplating it myself, definitely not happy, not a happy teenager with my circumstances, with my situations. But it's, again, at the same time, if I'm honest, I would put myself in situations where I was happy. So it's not like the melancholy is all the time, the depression is all the time. It's just sometimes. And there's this awful habit of the ego mind, the personality mind, the victim mindset to make the unpleasantness, the unpleasant situation, always situation. Now, we can also think of stories where somebody in the financial industry, I guess, who perhaps they committed a crime, perhaps whether true or not, their reputation was destroyed, perhaps there was some other kind of scandal. And so in response to that, they take their own life, throw themselves in front of a train, throw themselves off a bridge, out of a building. In that case, the mind feels that there is no way out. And it's the same situation where that ego part of the mind, which is so interesting because the ego part of the mind distracts itself by going into the past, distracts itself by going into the future, writing out into the future, into imagination. And then, so it plays with time, but then when something unpleasant, unwanted, unbearable, unreasonable happens in their lives, the mind makes it forever. It tells itself this story that it'll always be this way, whereas it's not true. And actually, what is here, what is the truth of this now moment, what's more true in this now moment is this unconditional loving support that's here. So again, how come it isn't already so deeply ingrained in our society that we're taught, that we teach our children, and that we ourselves are taught that it's to be expected that bad things happen. And especially if you do things that are out of alignment, out of integrity, and there are consequences to that, then that's your responsibility to work through, right? If we're the audience watching the movie and we watch them, we have an affection for them, but we watch them making bad decision upon bad decision, maybe they feel totally cornered, they have to make that decision, they steal from the company, they have that affair, whatever it is. So they make these decisions, but in the face of them being caught red-handed, say, what we want is to see them have the courage to find that integrity, to face it, to take responsibility, and to face the fear and to get to the other side of it. That's what we would want if we're watching their movie, right? We don't want to see them cop out, right? From our point of view, we would interpret that as cowardly, right? That they don't have the courage. So what we would wish upon them is to have that courage. And another type of suicide that I can think of, and that in a way I have direct experience of, is the honorable suicide. So I just talked about when the businessman or the politician faces a scandal, can't handle it, and then takes their own life as an out. But in comparison, what I'm about to share is not an out, it's the required course. So the story that I can tell you is in the Reiki tradition, one of the founders, Dr. Hayashi, he was a naval MD. He was a naval doctor, and he had studied Reiki under the original founder, Mikao Usui. Mikao Usui had had an experience, he had received enlightenment, and so he saw that there was a way to heal naturally using intention, using human touch. And so he was teaching others, and Dr. Hayashi was one of his students. Dr. Hayashi started a clinic, and he was also teaching a woman called Ms. Takata, who was a second-generation Japanese woman living in Hawaii. She was sick. She went back to Tokyo. She found the clinic, and then she received treatments from Dr. Hayashi's clinic. She stayed there for several months. She was being mentored by Dr. Hayashi, and then she invited Dr. Hayashi to Hawaii to teach some classes and give some seminars. It happened to be that at that time, it was during World War II. When he returned, he was pulled aside by the authorities, and he was asked to disclose what he saw, where the American bases were, things like that. And he didn't, I can't know, I wasn't there, but he wasn't there to be a spy for the Japanese army at the time, the Japanese Navy. So what ended up happening was that because he was bringing shame on his family, he committed suicide. The Japanese method of suicide is seppuku. So he committed seppuku, which is falling on the sword. Now, to that, there are also situations when, for example, if we look at stories in the Bible, and when we look at the different mentions of somebody taking their own life in the Bible, we still don't meet sin. Still in this whole conversation, we haven't met sin. We haven't met purgatory, and we haven't met any kind of demons. And that's interesting, right? It's a fact. This is what happened. It's an effect of the quality of the mind at the time, the circumstances at the time, and the end, basically. So in the Bible, we have the story of King Saul, for example, when he was gravely injured in battle, the situation he fears being captured and tortured by the enemy, the Philistines. He asks his armor bearer to take his life because he doesn't want to be captured. He doesn't want to be tortured. And he also doesn't want to deal with the shame of defeat. The armor bearer says no. And so then he falls on his own sword. So I'll just show you the passage there just for your own interest. And the battle went sore against Saul, and the archers hit him, and he was sore wounded of the archers. Then said Saul unto his armor-bearer, Draw thy sword and thrust me through therewith, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through and abuse me. But his armor-bearer would not, for he was sore afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell upon it, and when his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he fell likewise upon his sword and died with him. Okay, so again, there's no judgment here. There's no contemplation about what happens to his soul, God's impressions or thoughts about it, nothing like that. So our interpretation is just simply that it was a last desperate act by Saul to spare him from the shame, from the defeat, and from fear of being tortured, right? And so the next story that comes to mind is the story of Judas, right? And so in Judas's case, he wasn't afraid. He was overcome by guilt because he came to realize what he had done, that he had betrayed Jesus. So let's look at that verse. Then Judas, which had betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned, repented himself and brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned in that I have betrayed the innocent blood. And they said, What is that to us? See thou to that. And he cast down the pieces of silver in the temple and departed and went and hanged himself. And it's also said that Pilate committed suicide as well after he had let the Jews condemn Jesus to be crucified. If you remember that he tried to bargain with the Jews and say, here's a criminal. Which criminal would you opt to free? I'm going to give you a criminal to free. This was Pilate's way of trying to get out of the responsibility of Jesus being crucified, because Pilate's wife was listening to the teachings and had received some blessings. So he was stuck in a bind, but the Jews let the very violent, what was his name? Barbatus or something. They let him go. And so historians have said that Pilate ended up killing himself. All right, so on this cheerful note, I think it's time now to pass the basket. And so I just want to thank everyone who contributes to the coffers, to the ministry basket. I appreciate it. It helps us do this work, spread divine wisdom to help people heal through that wisdom, through self-knowledge, through the realizations of truths. So if you would like to make a contribution, it can be made by check. You can make it out to the Alila Ministry. The address is 430 Springfield Avenue in Berkeley Heights, New Jersey, 07922. Or if you prefer, you can contribute electronically using Zelle or PayPal. Zelle, you can use the number there. With PayPal, you can use the QR code there. All right, so let's just take a small break and listen to the music, and I'll see you on the other side. We'll continue our exploration on this delicate topic.
I'll give you rest. Stay with me, close to me, in the shadow of my wings. Walk with me, next to me. If you follow, I will lead. Lay down your head, I'll give you rest, and keep me close, lest you forget.
All right,
I'll give
welcome back.
you rest.
How are you feeling? Okay, so far again, we haven't found where the act of taking one's own physical life is a sin. We haven't met purgatory and we haven't met the devil. Now, it turns out that while self-inflicted death wasn't explicitly condemned in the Bible, it was in the 4th and 5th century, and then later in the Middle Ages, that it came to be that self-inflicted death came to be considered sinful because of the commandment, thou shalt not kill. So killing the self was considered and act against the commandments and act against God and therefore sinful. To be honest, I don't know where these thoughts about purgatory and burning in hell came from through the Christian lineage. But in the Upanishads, in the Isha Upanishad, there actually is reference to self-killing where you would end up burning in hell. So let's look at that. So the verse is, all who kill the self go after death to demonic worlds that are cloaked in blind darkness. Now, there are different interpretations of that, where the definition of the self is not necessarily synonymous with the body. So one interpretation of that phrase is that the self is actually what they call the Atman, which is the true self, the self that inhabits the body. And so to kill that self through sinful thinking and basically not having faith results in being in a hellish state of mind. So I'll leave that with you. And then in other traditions, in the Quran, to take your own life is considered a grave sin because it's going against the recognition that all life is sacred, and it's going against God's will for the human body and the human life, right? So the first time that I met the phenomena of taking one's own life in the quantum healing hypnosis work was very early on. I was still practicing, actually. I wasn't really doing the quantum healing hypnosis yet as an offering because I was still getting comfortable with the method. And so one of the early sessions was with a woman who went into a life at the time when King Louis XVI was in power. And in that life, he was a dignitary for King Louis. And King Louis was a tyrant, and he would destroy, kill anybody who went against him, or anybody he thought would go against him. And it was this dignitary's job to carry out these orders. And it was very difficult for him because he was carrying out orders with people that he knew and had worked with. So in the quantum healing hypnosis, we start by just getting a sense of the scene, getting to know who they are, what kind of work do they do, how old they are, whether they're male and female, that kind of thing, whether they're happy. And so in this process, we go through important days. And so the first important day, he has to issue an order to have people that he knows and has worked with killed, following King Louis's command. The next important day, we find him sending his wife and his family on a ship to go abroad to protect them in case King Louis turned his ire on this guy. And then the final day, then the last important day, is the last day of his life. And what he's doing is essentially he's asked his companion, who was like a live-in maid, to end his life via poison. And so on the other side of that, we didn't find any kind of moral quandary. In the quantum healing hypnosis work, we always continue the journey. Even though that life is over, we continue the journey to find out what are the next steps. So there's always an effect to the decisions, to the actions that we take in our lives. There is responsibility in the choices that we make in our lives. However, we didn't find purgatory. We didn't find hell and damnation. What we found actually is that it was the exit strategy. It just was that, just was the way out. It was just the way that life ended. And so that was quite eye-opening for me at the time. In a very recent session, a woman shared that in her lifetime now, a situation where her mom had, in her despair, in her melancholy, in her sadness, that she had made a decision to take her own life together with the lives of her children by driving the car off of a highway. And when we did an exploration of that situation, what we found is that actually the woman at that time was shifted to a different timeline. So the event took place when she was a small child, and then the timeline that she went to, that she picked up on, was from the age of 14. It's very difficult for us to wrap our heads around, but I wanted to share this story because if it's not meant for us to go, we won't. If there's more for us to do here in our life journey, then there are other forces that will prevent us from taking our own lives. She also shared how later on, when she was in her 20s, she was down and out in that melancholy state of mind, and she was planning to end her life by throwing herself off a bridge. And as she told that story, she shared how a force pushed her back. And so then when we inquired about that, when we asked the part of her consciousness that's overseeing her life what happened there, we learned that actually there was a guardian, a guide, who had interfered and was the force that pushed her back. And so again, by these two stories, we can't unknow that we're watched over, that we're never alone. And oftentimes I think when somebody finds themselves in that line of thinking, that in that moment they have forgotten that they're actually not alone, that they're looked over and looked after and taken care of, that they're meant to be here, that they have a purpose, their purpose is important, and there's more for them to do in this lifetime now. And it also seems that through the quantum healing hypnosis work and through prayer and so on, is that different souls have a different trajectory here. So for some people, it's a choose your own adventure, and they can make choices. So the choices that they can make are the highest expression, or it could be the lowest expression, the highest expression or the lowest expression. And so if they keep making lower expression type choices, it's going to have a certain kind of an effect and a certain kind of result on the mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical experience, right? But if they keep choosing the highest expression, the thought system that takes them closer to love, closer to peace, closer to God, as opposed to the thought system that takes them further into fear, doubt, guilt, and worry, if they're choosing that higher vibration type thought system, then it's going to have a very different kind of outcome. So I have seen that there are people who have that flexibility, their free will has that flexibility in a lifetime through the themes that they're here to experience. Whereas with other people, it's very much a fate-based experience of their lives. So it happens that this happens, I'm going to get into this school, I'm going to meet this person, I'm going to marry this person and have these children, this is where I'm going to live, these are the choices that I'm going to make, and this is how my life ends in the end. And so either way, the soul is welcomed home with unconditional love, compassion, and support. And if there is pain, if there is suffering, if this life was experienced as a very hard one, that they didn't overcome the chaos, they didn't overcome the pain and the trauma, then there might be a period where they receive healing and rest, and they get to take time to replenish, they get to come back to neutral, they get to assimilate those experiences and have an opportunity to do it again. Because some higher selves really want to experience everything. And so with the woman that I was sharing just a little while ago, it turned out that her soul is part of the evolution of the planet at this time, that her very first life was as part of the ocean as the ocean was forming on Earth. And that when we asked, she is scheduled to have 1,300 lives here on this planet. I'm not of the view that this is a slave system that some people are espousing. So she has a set number of lives to experience, to work through the evolution of humanity and the planet, to oversee the evolution of humanity and the planet through that time. And in between, she has breaks according to the part of her consciousness that oversees this life. She is at life 879, I think. So she has a few more to go. So she has given me permission to share her session. It's a fascinating session. So I will, in time, when I have space to put that video together, I will present that for you. And so we've looked at the different motives for a mind to want to end their physical lives, to take their own lives by their own hands. And so let's just hone in on that melancholy, depressed, hopeless, helpless, lonely type level of mind. So when that mind wants to take the life, they want an out, right? They want an out from the suffering. They want an out from the painful feeling states. They want an out from the mind, what the mind is doing. So their false belief is that by killing the body, that is the way out. But it's not the way out, actually. Truth is the way out. God is the way out. Faith is the way out. Love is the way out. So there's this inherent misunderstanding of what ending the body being the solution for the ending of suffering. So really what they want to end, really what they want to stop is the cycle of the mind and the stressful emotions. That's what they want to stop. And so we can see then that the body becomes innocent collateral damage. So let's now look at the body. The body is innocent. The body is an innocent mammal, as innocent as your puppy, as innocent as your kitten. One of the analogies that I use for people who are struggling is that it's like you have a horse. So the body is a horse that you love, that you take care of, that gets you from A to B. If you want your horse to be of service to you, your job is to make sure that your body, the horse, is happy, is healthy, is taken care of, is nurtured, has proper shoes on its hooves, has sweet apples to eat, good fresh hay to eat, water to drink, that is cleaned, brushed down. Perhaps you even whisper sweet nothings in your horse's ear. And then over time, your relationship with your horse, there's an integration, there's this congruency where your relationship becomes quite intuitive, and the horse knows exactly which way you want to go, even before you've even thought the thought. And so then one day, imagine that just like that, you become totally integrated, that there is this complete congruency between the horse and you become one. And so you feel the pebbles under your hooves. You can taste the crisp apple in your mouth. You feel the weight of the body. And so this is our experience of what it is to inhabit this body. We are not our bodies. We have a body, and yet we are not our bodies. The body is ever changing. The body that we had when we're 2 years old is different to the body we inhabit when we're 20 years old. The body that we have when we're 20 years old is very different to the body we're inhabiting at 40 years old. 40-year-old body is different to the body that we have at 80 years old. So the body is ever changing. It's arising and passing away. The cells die and the cells are reborn. But there is this part of ourselves, the Atman, the true self, the divine self, that is having this life experience through the personality. So from that point of view, then, to put a gun to the horse's head or to throw the horse off a cliff just feels crazy. And I get that it is a mad mind. It's a mind that's not right that would do that. Now, at the same time, we've also talked about how some people can be totally in their right mind. And that's, that's the case of the dignitary who was under King Louis XVI. And that's also true of some people now who may have been diagnosed with a terminal disease, and then of right mind, they opt to have an assisted suicide. So the main thing that I want you to take away is the body is innocent. This is one of the main things that I've been sharing through these services. I want you to have God's perspective of the human body. It's a vehicle, it's a vessel, it's a mammal, it's innocent, it's a servant. It's an amplifier, it's a transmuter, it's a recycling system, right? We're part of the recycling process of the planet. This is an enclosed recycling system. Nothing gets out of here. Nothing physical gets out of here alive, but we do, the self does. There's more. And so if someone reaches the point through false thinking, through a mind that is unholy, inevitably there will be the time when they have to look at that, face the fears, and take responsibility, because that's not what we're here to play out. What we're really here to play out is that, yes, the unpleasant, the awful, the unreasonable, the unwanted is expected here. It's inevitable, actually. And so our job is to choose peace, love, care, curiosity, generosity, courage in the face of that. That's the formula. That's the formula. Right? Right. So what we really want to remember, what's really important to remember, is that we chose to be here. We made an agreement to come, to have an experience, and that the body is part of that experience. The human mind is part of that experience. All the things unfolding is part of that experience. But we opted for this. We're not victims to our lives. This is an experience that we signed up to play. We came here to play our perfect parts. We're not really human. We are souls having this human experience, this biological experience on this biomodification experiment, planet, realm, whatever you want to call it. But what happens is the mind becomes, through the archetype of the addict, it becomes addicted to the human story and somehow becomes addicted to the suffering. And that's really what's happening, right? There's this addiction to the sadness, the melancholy, the upset. When I think about my great-great-grandfather, he had these beautiful children I think it was five beautiful children that were left, but he was making his own guilt and his own loss more important than what was directly in front of him. So dangerous, right? And so then, we can cast our minds to home to Jesus now, where he knew that Judas had betrayed him. And so, even in the face of that, knowing that, he says, the most important thing is not my will. He says, not my will, but thine be done. So our main inquiry must be that okay, I want to know my Father's will for me. And so maybe my Father's will for me is to keep following the path to peace, to keep choosing peace instead of this, to keep choosing love instead of this, to keep choosing curiosity instead of this, to keep choosing strength instead of this, because nothing here lasts forever. If it's here, it's on its way out. So I'd like to finish by making the sacredness and the sanctity of life the most important thing, to honor the gift and the grace of our bodies, our physical bodies, that are these beautiful, innocent, divine mammals with their wisdom, their longings, their desires, to take care of them, to nurture them, to listen, to pay attention, to have a conversation, so that we can use our precious time to know God's will for us, that we can use our time to fulfill the mission that we had agreed upon before we incarnated here in this physical life. The etymology of suicide. So suicide is a relatively new word. The etymology of it is, I made a note here, from the Latin word sui, which is self. And then, I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm guessing it's sidere, the act of slaying. So there was the Latin suicidium that was used in medieval and early Renaissance times. But then the first use of the word was in Thomas Browne's Religio Medici. So Thomas Browne was a physician and a philosopher, and he presented it there. And actually it was in that he references Shakespeare and how Shakespeare condemned Cato's suicide, where he took his own life. So that's where we find the condemning, right? That I think he said it was vile and cowardly. But so we can let that point of view be a passing point of view, but we don't want to live there. We don't. We want to have compassion for the people who thought at that time that there wasn't another way, that it was the only choice. And also, let's just be honest here as well, that the medications that are being used to treat people for their mental stress and their emotional states also creates the conditions for suicidal ideation. It's a known effect. And so there's that as well, right? So for our part, it's our lot. It is our commitment to our life's integrity, to remember that we are divine beings having a human experience, that we're not alone. We're part of a massive, incomprehensible divine collective that's overseeing our lives, and that part of our course is to bravely face our problems, to seek self-understanding and self-knowledge, to know ourselves, to transcend fear, to then know our transcendent nature. It's time for me to walk our Lucy, I think. All right, so thank you for joining with me. I hope this service was a helpful one for you. I know the topic is delicate, and so have a wonderful and blessed day. Thank you for being your unique, magnificent self. Only you can be you, and so for my part, I'm grateful for that. So I'll see you next time.
Is easy. Leave your cares, I'll give you rest. Come to me, come to me, come to me, come to me.